is the first part of that promise. Now, I think that it's interesting because we have to skip the next 4 books to go to Joshua. And in the book of Joshua, what happens in the book of Joshua? Second promise is fulfilled because what? They're given a land. Now, I've said this before, and I get a lot of kickback on this. Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. All right, now don't jump out of your seat because is the government established by God? Now then, why can I say government? We don't think of, unless you're Muslim, as a religious sect that carries out the instruction and the law all the way through. But according to God, who is the one that judges? God. So through this, does he tell them how to handle situations? And the answer is yes. When Noah came off the ark, what's the first commandment that God gave? And as far as I know, he never changed it. Because he saw what it does to his people. He said, if somebody commits murder, you kill them. You don't have them around. Now, brother and sister, you can say, well, you're ruthless. I want you to listen to me. How many children have been influenced by some murderer on death row that we kept alive for 20 years, and they got into that and studied everything about him, and instead of studying the Bible, they were studying, how many people has that happened to? We don't keep record of that, and that's a shame, because I can promise you that we have thousands, because it was amazing to me how many kids in school actually got into that stuff as a teacher and actually studied that. And why would you keep someone like that alive? And that's the reason why God saw what it did to his society in his creation in a period of about 2,000 years. And so what did he do? He destroyed the whole place with water, didn't he? Book of Genesis. So now then, and we've looked at this family as we come down through here. Now, we've looked at Abraham. And what was the one thing that you look at in Abraham's life that was one of those, it may have caused Isaac some mental issues? Huh? Being sacrificed. Being tied up, placed on an altar, and a knife to your throat. Abraham was willing to do what God had told him to do. Then we look at Isaac. Isaac, there's not much, because Isaac stayed. I mean, he didn't. And yet, with Isaac, what happened in that regard to that? He had twins, right? His wife had twin boys, and what happened there? The younger one stole the birthright from the older one by deceiving his dad, and mom was in the middle of it and helped all the way through. And then she tells him, oh, look what you've done. You need to get out of here. So he goes, Jacob goes, and then we get this, and we look at this family, and it's like, oh my word, God used this family? Are you kidding me? God's continuing to show us that he works his plan in spite of man, not because of man, but he will use man to make sure that he gets his point across. Now then, if you will, turn with me to Genesis chapter 49. And this is what we're going to start looking at right here. Now, with some of this stuff that I came up with here, I want to tell you right now, this is I didn't do deep study into all of this, but some of this stuff made sense when you look at this. And so let's go through here and take a look. So Jacob calls his sons in, and we talked about this. And this is his last visit with his children together. And so he gathered together, and hear, O sons of Jacob, and listen to Israel your father. All right? Now here's where he begins to tell them what's going to happen in regards to this. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might, and the beginning of my strength, preeminent in dignity and preeminent in power. Uncontrolled as water, you shall not have preeminence. because you went up to your father's bed, then you defiled it, then went up to my couch. Because we know that Reuben went into Bilhah, who was Rachel's maid after Rachel had died. That's in chapter 35. And he defiled his father. All right? Simeon and Levi are brothers. Their swords are implements of violence. Let my soul not enter into their counsel. Let not my glory be united with their assembly, because in their anger they slew men, and in their self-will they lamed oxen. Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, and their wrath, for it is cruel. I will disperse them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. Now then, we went back to this, and we said that we know what Simeon and Levi did when their sister had been kidnapped and raped. They went in, circumcised every man, and then they killed them. And it didn't, brothers and sisters, there was no age limit. It was males, period. When we look at this then, he says that you'll be dispersed through Israel. Well, Judah, it says when you start looking over in Joshua chapters 18 and 19 where it's broken up then, that Simeon didn't receive anything. He was dispersed because Judah's land part was so large that he was given, you're just in here and given a few cities. Levi had no inheritance. You're the priestly tribe, you have towns, you have property, but you don't have an inheritance. You're not recognized as a tribe in this regard. Now, I want to go back to something, and I mentioned on this last week. And so when you look at this and their fierce anger and so on, as you come through, who killed Jesus? Levites. The priests. The Levites in this regard. So they had no inheritance. This is pointing to this idea that because you're so cruel that you receive not. Now, here's Jacob's first three sons. Which one is the inheritance passed through? None of the three. The oldest one, because of what he had done. The next two, because of their lifestyle. The inheritance is not passed through them. Turn over to Matthew chapter 1, those first 12 verses right there, and it talks about that Judah is the one that the inheritance is passed through. That's son number 4. And then we take a look at Judah, and we're thinking, wait a second, Larry, Judah's the one that after his wife died, he's on his way to go shear sheep and stops off thinking that he's picking up a prostitute and it's his daughter-in-law. Are you kidding me? And goes into her. She conceives twins. And once again, which twin gets chosen as the birthright? Well, over in Matthew, it tells us that the younger of the two, because they were Perez, and I can't remember the other one's name right now. And so the younger one, once again, but it's passed through, and it's like, are you kidding me? God, you chose this family? Yeah, he did. Because why? His plan will be worked regardless of what we do. Do I want to be part of that plan that God is working through? Yeah. I want to be part of that. That's what this book is about to me when I look at it. God can even take somebody like me and use me. So when he looks at Judah, he says, Judah, your brothers shall praise you. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies, which Christ did. Your father's sons shall all bow down to you. And in that day when he returns, every knee will bow. Judah is the lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. Was Jesus' prey for the Levites with, for the priests and so on? Was he the prey? And the answer is yeah. The predators came after him, and he was the prey, as the lamb led before its shearers. But he couches like, and he lies down as a lion. And as a lion, who dares rouse him up? The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until Shiloh comes. And to him shall be the obedience of the peoples. Is there any place in the world that Jesus Christ isn't known about? I don't think so. I think the apostles did their job when Jesus said, "Go into all the world and preach," because he ties his foal to the vine and his donkey's colt to the choice vine. He washes his garments in wine and his robes in the blood of grapes. His eyes are dull from wine and his teeth white from milk. And he's talking about Jesus Christ right here because, as we said last week and so on, what do we prepare for this morning? Why are we here this morning? Is to come together to commune with Jesus Christ in spirit, in his kingdom this morning, through the grape of through the fruit of the vine, grapes, grape juice, and this grape, that the blood of grapes in this regard. Then it gets into the rest of them. And here's where I had to just a quick pull something up and see what was going on with this. Zebulun, not much, will dwell at the seashore and shall be a haven for ships, and his flank shall be toward Sidon. So what we find out is that they were sailors. They did a lot of commerce. They did a lot of navals in this regard, protecting the coastline and so on as well. So they were involved in this. Then when it came to Issachar is a strong donkey lying down. This one didn't make sense to me until I kind of looked back and, what are they? And a strong donkey lying down between the sheepfold. When he saw that a resting place was good and that the land was pleasant, he bowed his shoulder to bear burdens and became a slave at forced labor. So it says that Issachar then was profound in wisdom. Okay? So what they did was, and often they had understanding of times and seasons and these things, and often worked with Zebulun for mutual and spiritual and material support. So they kind of did those things, but they had somebody else working for them. And so because they were more passive in some regards and so on, then they became enslaved. When you're not willing to fight, you don't have much to look forward to except slavery by somebody in that regard. And so it pointed toward this idea for Issachar. Then when we get to verse 16 and 17, Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. All right, this part makes sense because Dan, who came from the tribe of Dan? Samson. Samson was from the tribe of Dan. He was one of the judges. Makes sense right here. And Dan shall be a serpent. Oh, wait a minute. If you're a judge, then how do you become a serpent in the way, a horned snake in the path that bites the horse's heels, so that the rider shall fall backward? For your salvation I wait, O Lord. What happens to Dan? Dan is one of those tribes, and they're in there, and they literally build a temple to foreign gods and idolatry. They even build a golden calf later on. So now then you can see that from the judging that God had assigned in this regard, that they go back to, and when you talk about this, I thought this was interesting as well. When you go into Revelation, and the book of Revelation is talking about the tribes of Israel, guess who is not mentioned, has no inheritance, no word? Tribe of Dan. They are left out completely. Because why? Now, Now then, let's go back to Genesis chapter 4. And what God tell the serpent? Yeah. And so what's he referring to? Dan right here. All right. So now then, when you go back and you start putting this, because when you just read through this, a lot of times we've probably read through this and it just didn't mean anything. So now then we go back and you get a little of the history. And it's like, okay, I see. Now then, golden calf was built in Dan, and Dan's not mentioned in the book of Revelation that was there. All right. Gad, raiders shall raid him, but he will raid at their heels. Gad was warriors. They were warring tribes. They seemed like they were more in conflict than any of the other tribes, just because. Asher, I thought this one was very interesting. Asher was noted for, if you will, olive oil. They were farm, and they had olive oil, and said that the tribe of Asher was noted literally around the world. And of course, the tribe of Zebulun helped them because they exported the stuff on shipping routes and so on, and that they were noted for olive oil. And because of this, then, when you look at this, Asher shall be rich, royal deities, and so on. Well, guess who was coming there and sending caravans there to get their olive oil to cook with and so on, and use in their foods and so on? Well, all these deities from other places in the world. Kind of an interesting concept right there for Asher. And Naphtali is a doe let loose, gives beautiful words. Naphtali was noted for its bravery in battle, eloquent speech, and fertile territory. Now, Naphtali also is, if we look at this, gives beautiful words. So they were, more literary conscious than some of the other tribes. But also, a gentleman by the name of Barak, and I'm not talking about our modern day politics, but who was this General Barak? Well, he was the one that went with Deborah to fight against Sisera. He was from the tribe of Naphtali. And when you look at their time, the area where Jesus began his preaching in Galilee is also the territory that Naphtali, this was their tribal land. Then when we look, and they would join Zebulun to fight Sisera. This was Barak, and this is in Judges 4 and 5, where you can read that story. Now then, he comes down, and we get to Joseph. Joseph, to me, is an interesting character in the fact that Dad's favorite, and yet he doesn't get an inheritance. It's given to his two sons. And of course, once again, because they're twins, what does Jacob do when he hands out the blessing? He gives the younger one the blessing as he had received when he deceived Jacob, or deceived Isaac for Esau. And so interesting that we come down through here. But rather, he gives two portions. Now think about it. He says they're half tribes, but he receives a double portion. Is that what is that what Jacob had always done to Joseph, was give him more than the other brothers? And the answer is yes. So because he's got two sons, he receives a double portion in this regard, because Ephraim and Manasseh were the two tribes. And so when we look at this, Manasseh means fruitfulness and expansion, and symbolized by wheat and fruit vines. Ephraim often symbolized the the entire northern kingdom for preeminence and idolatry. That's not something to be noted for. And the Ephraim, being the younger, was the one that carried this promise through of Joseph. Now then, Benjamin is the last one that we look at. And we talk about, it talked about, we looked at this a little bit last week about Joseph and how he endured. And then we get down to Benjamin, the youngest boy. Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. In the morning, he devours the prey, and in the evening, he divides the spoil. All right? Now then, what about Benjamin? Well, they were warriors. The tribe of Benjamin were warring. They were good. I think it's interesting that they were skilled in archery and slinging stones. Who do you think of when you think of somebody slinging a stone? David. Yeah. I wondered about this too, and okay, here's where my history is very limited on, study and so on, because I don't know exactly when the catapult came into, when you could look at when they started slinging rocks by you. So I don't know, but when I saw this and they were good at slinging rocks as well, I'm thinking, that sounds like a catapult as well as a slingshot and so on in that regard. Now, when you look at this and it says, and in the evening divides the spoil. All right, this didn't make a whole lot of sense until who was the first king of Israel? Saul. Saul was from the tribe of Benjamin. He was from the tribe of Benjamin. What did Saul do that upset God? Kill them all. Kept the stuff, brought it back, and did what? Divided the spoil. And he was told, don't do that. When you look at the stories and see, bless our hearts, we just don't, that's what you say when you, God forgive me that I haven't studied this enough to understand. And it makes so much more sense as you start to go through the Bible and you get these stories like, oh, well, he's talking about, and he goes, well, yeah, and it makes sense. It's not just, well, what's that talking about? It makes sense what it talks about. Because this broke Benjamin with what Saul did. So when he looks at this, and he's given everything to his sons now. Here's your blessings. These are the 12 tribes of Israel, and this is what their father said to them when he blessed them. He blessed them, every one, with a blessing appropriate to them. Does a blessing mean that everything is good? Doesn't, does it? Now, because some of the blessing here, when you look at what he's talking about to Simeon and Levi, I wouldn't consider that a blessing, but that's what Dad said. That's the blessing that comes down. In some regards, we might refer to it as consequences, but in this regard, this is Dad's last rites, and this is what he's putting on them. This is what I see from you. This is the blessing that you have coming. We wouldn't refer to that as a blessing because we equate blessing to the goodness of God. Different blessing right here. Then he charged them and said, now here's where Jacob gives them specific instructions. Abraham bought property. He is a landowner in the land of Canaan, correct? Bought the field, bought the cave that was there, and is buried there, along with his wife, Sarah. Who else is buried there? Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, and who else is buried there? Leah. Now, I think that this is interesting, and I had to go at it from here. Rachel was the one that he loved, but Rachel died in an area where she was buried close to Bethlehem. Leah was the first wife that he was given by Laban, and Leah is buried in the cave with the matriarchs. So what are Jacob's instructions to Joseph and his sons? But he's specifically talking to Joseph because who right now has the power? Joseph does, right? Because of his relationship and his position in Egypt right now. So he tells him then that I will go back there. They buried Abraham and his wife Sarah. There they buried Isaac and his wife Rebekah. And there I buried Leah in the field and the cave that is in it, purchased from the sons of Heth. And when Jacob, and that's where he said, this is what you will, and you're not going to wait. You're not going to, when Joseph dies, they waited until what? Joseph just said, don't leave my bones here. And so when the children all left, well, then they took his remains. That's not the case right here. What is Jacob going to do? He said, you take me up there and bury me now. All right? And when Jacob finished, and I thought about this too, would this be the way that we maybe all would wish that we could go? When Jacob finished charging his sons, he drew his feet into the bed, breathed his last, and was gathered to his people. In that regard, we could say that God blessed him. He got to be with his family. He got to see his sons for the last time, and then he passed away. So when this happens, of course, Joseph falls on him, kisses him, weeps over his father, and then Joseph summons his physicians, and they begin the process. 40 days it takes to embalm the body of Jacob. 40 days. And the Egyptians, and I wondered about this, if this was just what the Egyptians did, how they came about, but 70 days of mourning. That's over 2 months, And if you really look at it, and here you go, man, you could get off into some tangents right here, but some people say that our calendar's messed up, that originally you had 13 months, 28 days, and you had 1 day left over, which was that leap year day kind of deal. And if you haven't gone through and figured it out, it works out perfectly. Yeah, you got 13 months of 28 days and go from there. So I don't know if that's what it was, but it says 70 days that the Egyptians would mourn for this in this regard. And so when the days of mourning were past, then, well, what did they do? They took the body. They took the body and, well, I think that this is an interesting part too, because it makes me wonder, if you look at the story of what happened to Joseph and how the young Pharaoh picked Joseph so Joseph has been in service. Have they changed pharaohs? And I don't know. I didn't check the history on this, but I'm thinking that they have right here. That there is another pharaoh in place during this 17-year time frame and so on, that something has happened while Jacob was here, because when the days of mourning were past, Joseph spoke to the household of Pharaoh. You would have thought that he would have been, but once again, he was a Hebrew, which was so, and he talks to the people in charge of Pharaoh's house. And if I have now found favor in your sight, please speak to Pharaoh. So the household is the one that's going to speak to Pharaoh. Joseph can't go in to speak to Pharaoh. Think about that for a moment. After what he had done in saving Egypt and stripping Egypt, Pharaoh had control of everything. He had all the money, he had all the land, he had all the livestock, he had all the people. The people were enslaved. They had nothing. They had sold themselves in the last year of the famine in order to get food. They had nothing. Pharaoh had everything in the country, including the people as slaves, and they lived in cities where they could. So something has happened here, because Joseph doesn't have the pull that he once had, apparently. And go in and say to Pharaoh then that my father made me swear, saying, Behold, I am about to die in my grave, which I dug for myself in the land of Canaan. There you shall bury me. Now therefore, please let me go up and bury my father. Then I will return. Pharaoh said, Go up and bury your father as he made you swear. So Joseph went up to bury his father, and with him went all the servants of Pharaoh, the elders of his household, and all the elders of the land of Egypt, and all the household of Joseph and his brothers and his father's household. They left only their little ones and their flocks and their herds in the land of Goshen. Why'd they send all these Egyptians up there? Thank you. Making sure they came back. You belong to Pharaoh. You ain't going up there and cutting away. You're coming back. Slave labor has already been assigned because apparently I'm sure these people didn't know who Jacob was. And Pharaoh just said, yeah, you're going to go, but I'm going to make sure that you come back. And you'll leave your little ones here and all the flocks and so on. So, yeah, this was just to make sure that they came back. So they went up with him. Prove my point. Both chariots and horsemen. And it was a very great company. Didn't need chariots and horsemen, did you? I mean, of course, when you got all those officials from Egypt, you're going to protect them and so on. So you've got a reason, but at the same time, you're making sure everybody comes back. And when they came into the threshing floor of Atad, which is beyond the Jordan, they lamented there, and with a very great and sorrowful lamentation. And he observed 7 days mourning for his father. When the inhabitants of the land of Canaan saw the mourning at the threshing floor of Atad, this is a grievous mourning for the Egyptians. Therefore, it was named Abel Misery. Somebody pronounce that for me. I always call it misery because that's what I think of when I look at it. Abel Mizraim, which is beyond the Jordan. Thus his sons did for him as he had charged, for his sons carried him to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave of the field of Machpelah before Mamre, which Abraham had bought. So it's still owned by this family of Abraham's, along with the field for a burial site from Ephron the Hittite. And after he had buried his father Joseph, returned then to Egypt, and his brothers, and all who had gone up with him to bury his father. Now when Joseph's brothers, now here's the sad part of this story. Now remember, Joseph tortured his brothers for 2 years, right? Put them in prison, kept them in prison, did all these kind of different things to them as they were trying to get food and they couldn't figure out who he was and everything. I mean, he tortured them. Well, do you think brothers forgot that? Brothers knew what was going on, and now then, who's gone? Daddy's gone. How would you like to live your life? First of all, when you think about these brothers, what they did to Joseph before they sold him, I'm talking about all the things that had happened over the years, and then they sell him, tell their dad that he's died and everything, and you're living with that, and then after you finally see him again, he's alive. Now what do you live with? Do you have a free mind? No, because now then what's he going to do? Oh my gosh, from where he is, and say he could kill us all. So they lived with that for another 17 years after they got. And now then, what are they afraid of? What if Joseph bears a grudge against us and pays us back in full for all the wrong which we did to him? So they sent a message to Joseph saying, your father charged before he died, and now please forgive the transgression of the servants of the God of your father. And Joseph wept when they spoke to him. Then his brothers also came and fell down before him, and behold, we are your servants. They surrendered themselves, just Not only did they bow down once before, but now they're bowing down again, just like the dream where his brothers bowed down to him, their shoes bowed down, And Joseph said to them, "Do not be afraid, for am I in God's place?" He had already done enough. I think Joseph understood what he had done was enough, and he's not God in that regard. God will do to them he listened to what his dad said to each of his brothers. Wasn't that in some regards condemnation enough in that regard? But as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good in order to bring about this present result, to preserve many people alive. So therefore, do not be afraid. I will provide for you and your little ones. So Joseph had developed and understood that through all the things that had happened to him, that God worked his plan. And what man does, you guys meant this for evil, but to get rid of me. But God used it. And because of that, look at the number of people that they saved. Not just his own family right there, but even though they had to sell themselves, the Egyptians and neighboring countries that had been blessed by the food that Joseph had stored. So now then, Joseph saw the third generation of Ephraim's son, so Joseph is prepared to die. And what does he say? I am about to die, but God will surely take care of you and bring you up from the land to the land which he promised on oath to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. Then Joseph made the sons of Israel swear, saying, God will surely take care of you, and you shall carry my bones up from here. So Joseph died at the age of 110 years, and he was embalmed and placed in a coffin in Egypt. Joseph passed before his other brothers at the age of 110 because he's talking to his other brothers in this regard. Now then, when we go and we look, like I say, you got to read the first 6 verses, I think, or 7 of. Now these are the names of Exodus chapter 1. Sons of Israel who came to Egypt with Jacob. They came each with his household: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. All the persons who came from the loins of Jacob were 70 in number. But Joseph was already in Egypt. Joseph died, and all his brothers, and all that generation. But the sons of Israel were fruitful and increased greatly and multiplied and became exceedingly mighty, so that the land was filled with them. I think this goes with Genesis. Because what happened? God fulfilled the first promise to Abraham right here. Because what happens to Israel? They become a mighty, mighty nation. So mighty, in fact, that with Exodus, what we learn, what happens to Pharaoh? He becomes afraid of them because they are so many in number. All right? I hope that through this you have attained something through here that was beneficial, and I have enjoyed teaching. I know it's been a long, drawn-out process, but been a lot of good stuff in there. Thank you all, and Gene's got you next week. And I also want to mention this morning that Harold, we want to remember Harold and Courtney and Miley. They're sick, and his parents are still here taking care of them. So Anthony will be preaching this morning, and I know that we have others who are sick as well. And keep all of those in your prayers this morning. Thank you.